Welcome to the Story Fulfilled podcast, where we deep dive into how each character and story in the Bible come together to fulfill the story of God. I'm Abby.
I'm Jay.
And I'm Fletcher.
And today's story is about the Ethiopian eunuch who Philip encounters on the road.
Yes, it is.
Ethiopian Eunuch.
Eunuch. Yes.
It's hard to make fun of his name. It's like Ethiopian, yeah, okay, eunuch, yeah. He's had enough. He's bad enough.
Kids, if you don't know what a eunuch is, ask your parents.
Yes. Don't Google. All right. So we have this crazy thing that happens at the end of this story when Philip is transported to another place. So if you could transport anywhere right now, this very moment,
this second,
where would you go?
Honestly, it's a pathetic answer, but the bathroom. I should have gone before starting.
Wow.
It's like hide and seek all over again.
102.
It has to be right now. Don't think
right
it.
now.
It's
Don't
no
think about it. I want to say like McDonald's.
Wow.
I don't know. I'm hungry. I haven't eaten in a while. Somewhere to eat. Maybe not McDonald's. But that's all I can afford. So
Wow. I want to go to the Yukon.
Wow, yours
interesting.
is way more interesting.
I was going to say somewhere like Japan because I've been wanting to travel to Japan.
He definitely thought about that much. I can think about it and get a better answer.
No, but I was just thinking because it's still summertime, but it's a lot cooler.
Freeze.
It's a lot cooler, right? Like
there are bears.
Yeah, but you get a horn and some spray and you're good.
Yeah, according to my cousin Ellie, if you spray bug spray on yourself, the bears don't come near you.
Bug spray?
Has she ever seen bears?
Bear spray. If you spray bear spray on yourself,
bear spray.
Then
I think you said bug spray. If you spray bear spray,
if you spray bear spray on yourself,
does she know bear spray is like really strong pepper spray, and if you spray it on yourself, it's just gonna burn?
Did it keep the bears away because she was out
She's never done it
for a while?
She's never done it.
She just started camping last year.
Okay,
and she's loving it.
Yeah, she's loving it, but didn't know that. She just thought it was like bug spray.
Keep the bears away with the bear spray. Keep the bugs away with the bug spray. Interesting.
I mean, I don't know if she's wrong.
I'll see her next week, and I'll spray her with some bear spray.
Yeah.
See how she likes it. No, I'm just joking.
See if it keeps the bears away.
All right, so I'm going to the Yukon while Abby goes pee and Fletcher gets some McDonald's.
Yeah.
A Grand Big Mac because it's different than a Big Mac.
I'm a bigger fan of the double than the Grand.
Right.
The Grand slides around too much.
Okay.
Gross.
Anyway.
Okay.
So, as always, we have gone off the rails.
Of experience.
But as always, we also encourage you to read the stories for yourselves to get the whole picture of what's going on. And today's story takes place in the book of Acts. And also, as always, we'd love to know where you'd be teleported. So
yes. Right
now.
Don't think about it.
Well, not right now because they're not going to hear this until it...
When you're listening.
At this moment.
Comment on our Instagram.
Yes.
That's right.
Where do you want to go?
Instantaneously. Or our email.
Story@bfmc.org.
Awesome. Okay, so last week we talked about King Xerxes or Ahasuerus, depending on your reading of it, and he was the king of Persia and also the husband of Esther. And this week we're actually jumping ahead into the New Testament, and we're skipping over the Gospels, and we're in the book of Acts. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So after the Israelites returned from the Babylonian exile, they rebuilt the temple. That was Ezra and Nehemiah, and the city walls in Jerusalem. And then that enters them into what's referred to as the Second Temple period. And they are ruled by the Seleucids.
Yeah.
Is that the right word?
I think so.
Seleucids.
When do we ever pronounce anything right?
Yeah.
So.
There's a lot of things on this podcast. Pronunciation is not one you should trust.
Right. So, but if you say it confidently, then yeah. And I didn't. I paused. So,
you did.
But the Seleucids are a kingdom which were founded by one of the generals of Alexander the Great, who we've noted that great people name themselves great. And so a Seleucid king named Antiochus Epiphanes hated...
That one was confident.
Yeah, just out with it. But he hated the Jews, and he tried to get rid of the Jewish religion. And he actually disgraced the temple by erecting an altar to Zeus and sacrificing pigs inside, among other atrocities. So if you know anything about kosher law, pigs, Jews were to have nothing to do with pigs or be anywhere near them. And so he did that, and he did some other horrible things as well. And so there's actually a rebellion that was led by the Maccabees, who were able to cleanse the temple, and they reestablished Jewish sacrifices. And then the Roman Empire eventually conquers the whole area. So should say that all of that we were just talking about, the Maccabees and that whole period, is not written about in Jewish or Christian literature. That's intertestamental, yeah. Okay. So it's during what's known as the 400 years of silence. And so, eventually Rome comes and they set up their empire, and that's when a certain important character is born.
Who's that, Jay?
His name is Jesus.
Oh, heard of him.
And he was born in Nazareth. He's crucified, and he comes back to life, and he and his followers, he has followers who become known as
the
Christians, or followers of the way.
Little Christ.
And that's exactly where we're starting off our story. But before that, history, it's just kind of repeating what Jay's saying, but the Second Temple period lasted between about 516 BC and 70 AD. And then we said Alexander and the Seleucids, he takes Jerusalem on his way to Egypt in 332 BC. The Maccabean revolt is 160 to 167 BC. The Romans capture Jerusalem in 63 BC, and then today's story takes place approximately a year after the ascension of Jesus in the year about 31 AD.
Right.
So, like we've said, the Romans kind of control the whole area, but there is this local tetrarch or king whose name is Herod, and he's in charge of the Judea-Galilee area. And the religious leaders, they're called the Sanhedrin. They're the Jewish religious leaders called the Sanhedrin, and they hold also some authority in the area. At this exact moment, the Christians are being persecuted in Jerusalem after a man named Stephen was stoned to death, and he was the first Christian martyr. Right. But since then, they've the church has been scattered in Jerusalem, and they're just out preaching wherever they can go.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, so despite the story being about a man from Ethiopia, it does not actually take place in Ethiopia.
Mm-hmm.
I'm let down. Disappointing.
Sorry. But it actually takes place on a desert road between Jerusalem and Gaza. Gaza is about 80 kilometers west of Jerusalem. It's right on the coast of the Mediterranean Sea. Probably a lovely place to spend vacation.
Yeah. I changed where I want to be teleported now.
There you go, to Gaza.
Mediterranean Sea.
So it makes sense for Philip to be near Jerusalem, but this Ethiopian eunuch was really far from home. As Ethiopia is actually 2,600 kilometers away from Jerusalem. Now on a map, we think about that Ethiopia doesn't seem that far from Jerusalem. They're both in the same area, but we use a Mercator projection map, and that preserves the shape of countries. It skews sizes north and south of the equator. For example, although Canada looks massive, much bigger than Africa, in reality, Canada could fit inside of Africa 3 times.
Right.
So
it's big.
Yes. So with that in mind, here's one more example to show how far he was. Jerusalem to Ethiopia is about the same distance as if you were to go from Toronto to Houston, Texas. So that's pretty far.
That's another place that I wouldn't mind being teleported.
Let's teleport to Houston right now.
I don't think I'd want. No, not in the middle of summer.
You're right.
Yeah, I guess.
That's kind of silly, guys. Come on.
Pretty hot.
So
Houston's up in the north, I think, isn't it? Or is that far?
It's in Texas. Texas is just hot.
Texas is hot everywhere.
Just like Ethiopia.
That's right.
Yes. Alternatively, it is thought that Ethiopia probably refers to ancient Nubia or Kush, which is the south of Egypt. So still South Egypt, North Ethiopia area, still very far from Jerusalem. Best part of the story geographically, though, is the literal teleportation at the end, where the Lord moves Philip about 30 kilometers west of where they are to this area that's modern day Ashdod, which is just a little north of Gaza, and it's also on the coast of the Mediterranean Sea.
The NASB says that the Spirit snatched him away.
That's awesome.
This is by far what kind of
snatched him away.
Good superpower.
All right, speaking of snatching away, let's start our story. because I'm snatching geography away from Abby. Anyway, so we start our
So bad.
segues. So we start our story with a Christian deacon and leader of the church named Philip, and he preached the gospel wherever he went since he has left Jerusalem and is being persecuted there. He was preaching in a town called Samaria, which is just north of Jerusalem, when an angel appeared to him and told him to go to the road from Jerusalem to Gaza. So he's on his way there, and while he's on the road, he actually met a man riding in a chariot on the road, and he was reading out loud the scroll of Isaiah. And he was an Ethiopian eunuch who was in charge. He was like this high official in charge of the treasury of the queen of Ethiopia, or of Cush. A eunuch is a castrated man who's often an official high in the government. You see this especially in the books of Daniel and Esther.
Right.
You know, the eunuchs did this, eunuchs did that. They were high up in the government. So he's not a slouch. He's an important guy in the Ethiopian monarchy, let's say. So this man was heading home from Jerusalem, where he was worshiping. This means he was probably a Jewish convert to Jerusalem to Judaism from Ethiopia. And he was reading this scroll of Isaiah out loud. And we'll read what he was reading. It says, "He was led like a sheep to the slaughter, and as a lamb before its shearers, it is silent. So he did not open his mouth. In his humiliation, he was deprived of justice. Who can speak of his descendants? For his life was taken from the earth." And Philip goes up and asks, the Ethiopian man, "Do you understand what you're reading?"
Right.
And the eunuch replies, "How can I understand unless someone explains it to him?" He then asks Philip, who the prophet is talking about in this sentence, himself or someone else. Philip then preaches the gospel to the man, telling him about the good news of Jesus, and the eunuch right there converts, and he asks to be baptized on the spot. So they pull over right next to the water. Again, we've said it's in the Mediterranean. Good place to be baptized, I guess.
Yeah.
Beautiful water. And Philip baptizes them right then and there. And it says then, as soon as he finished baptizing the man, the Spirit took Philip, or snatched him away, and the eunuch went on his way rejoicing. And Philip then later showed up in Ashdod, preaching the gospel there as well. And that's what you said, 30 kilometers away?
Yes.
Yeah. And then one other thing with the Ethiopian eunuch, tradition says that man actually went on to found the Ethiopian church.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow, Philip.
What a man.
As you notice, he's preaching the gospel, and then the Spirit says, "Okay, I want you to go here," and he ends up preaching the gospel, and then he's snatched away, and where he lands, preaching the gospel.
Yeah.
At all times, preaching the gospel. He's all about sharing who Jesus is and what Jesus has done.
Absolutely.
Which is, that's so cool. I think another really cool thing is that he was going about the work that was set before him. He was preaching the gospel in Samaria, and the angel appears and says, "I want you to go to this road in between Jerusalem and Gaza." Now, if I'm him, I'm thinking, but I'm doing something very important right now. You're asking me to go to the middle of nowhere where there is nobody. There's no, I can't preach the gospel there. Mm-hmm. I need to be around people. I need to be doing this thing that is so important. But I think what is revealed is that what is most important is to be responsive and obedient to the Spirit. As the Spirit leads, we live, we follow as he leads and where he leads us. And so
then how fruitful that becomes when we do obey.
Right. So he's led to this road, and then he's met with hey, just let me say this. If somebody ever asks you, can you explain the gospel to me?
Do it.
Jump on that opportunity. What a golden opportunity he's given, right? The eunuch is reading through Isaiah, and for us as Christians, we look back and we read Isaiah 53 and we're like, okay, this is so clearly a picture of Jesus. How cool is it that it's written of Jesus well before he lived, and that's great. But this Ethiopian eunuch knew nothing of Jesus, and he had no idea what he was reading, but he wanted to know God, and he wanted to know more, and so he asks, and who is this talking about? What is this all about? And Philip says, "Oh, I see an open door. I'm going to preach the gospel. I'm going to share the whole story." So I think that's really, really cool.
What you touched on there with him asking the question is really what stood out to me in the whole story is the Ethiopian man asked like a fantastic question. How can I understand unless someone explains it to me?
Right.
It's so true. Like the only way you're going to learn is if you're asking questions and learning more. The Bible's not an easy book to read. It's complicated, and people have been studying it for almost 2,000 years, and there's still more to be uncovered and learned. So I think I would, and I think Jay would, and Abby would as well, but really encourage you to read the Bible, but also ask questions and learn and study it, not just read it and say, okay, well, I've read my Bible for the day. You want to learn more and grow more in your understanding of it.
Yeah. I think that's cool. And just like a key about like Isaiah, he's reading from Isaiah 53, and as I said, when we look at it, we read and we see that it's pretty clearly a picture of Jesus, but that's not always true. It's not. We don't always read it and say, oh, that's clearly a picture of Jesus. I actually remember a time when I was younger in my walk with Jesus, and somebody had said, like as an exercise, read Psalm 22 and come back and tell, like we'll talk as a group what you think about that. And I remember reading through it and not seeing clearly that, wow, that's actually a picture of Jesus on the cross. And so it's not always the case that it just pops out immediately. And
it's not a surface, like if you're just reading it on a surface level, it's not going to pop out to you. But the truth and the beauty of it really comes out in understanding what it means. Yeah.
And so I think what the importance is in that is that when we read the scriptures, we need to do so through the lens of Jesus. So I think like when I talk to new believers, people who aren't familiar with the Bible, my instruction or my advice is, if you want to read the Bible, don't start at Genesis. No. Don't start with Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And then after you've read that, read Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John again. And then you might actually be ready to understand a little bit that is spoken of in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, right? And so like spend your time in the Gospels, spend a lot of time in the Gospels, get a picture for who Jesus is. And then as you read the rest of the Bible, and you read even some of the more difficult things that are presented throughout Scripture, you get into the book of Judges and you read some things, you're like, oh, what does that all mean? But when you read that through the lens of who Jesus is, that gives you a better picture of what God's plan is in the middle of all of these difficult to understand things.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So
I guess that leads us to our final question.
It sure does.
So how does this story lead to the fulfilling of the story of God throughout the rest of the Bible?
Well, what I found after I read, it was Acts chapter 8, and I think it's 36. And I'm going, okay, so the Ethiopian eunuch asked the question, is this about the prophet or is this about someone else? And then it says, and then Philip preached the gospel. And I'm like, oh, that's fantastic. But he never explains really what's going on there. Like what is Isaiah 53 and how does it actually show what Jesus is? So you should go read, first of all, read chapter 53 of Isaiah. Again, keeping in context, it's about Jesus, and that's kind of what it is. But the passage never gives us the answer. So let's try to cover it. The Ethiopian eunuch is reading from a scroll of Isaiah. It was probably written around the 8th century BC. And the section he's reading of is called the suffering servant, and this is kind of a recurring person in the book of Isaiah. But it's in a few other chapters, and then in 53 it's about specifically this suffering servant and who he would be and what's going to happen to him. And the section we read, I'll just pull up a couple other parts of it. Where is it? He was like a sheep to the slaughter. He was a lamb before his shearers. He's silent, so he didn't speak. He did not open his mouth. In his humiliation, he was deprived of justice. Who can speak of his descendants? For his life was taken from the earth. And you actually see, like, the imagery that is in that is all Jesus. And it's actually referenced in the Gospels. I have a couple written down. Matthew chapter 8, John chapter 12, Luke chapter 22, all reference Isaiah 53. Right. To the acts that Jesus is doing and in the prophecy that he's fulfilling in that. So I read it. I'm like, oh, they didn't answer it. So we're trying to read Isaiah 53 and then read those Matthew 8, John 12, Luke 22, and you'll see how Jesus is fulfilling it. And then again, in his death on the cross is also in 53, and it's
Right.
really cool. I encourage you to read that and just learn more for it. I can't explain it all right now. There's a whole chapter, and there's dozens of references in the Gospels of Isaiah 53, but it is such a cool passage, and yeah, it's prophecy of Jesus, and he's fulfilling them all. So
Right.
very cool.
Which is the fulfillment of the story.
The story.
And I actually want to add one more thing to that. I think it also, this story shows a lot about the character of God. Because he's going, like, he literally transported someone into the middle of nowhere to talk to one person about Jesus. And so, like, God can reach you wherever you are if your heart is willing to listen. So I think that's cool about the character of God as well.
Absolutely.
And nobody is not important enough for us to share the gospel with.
It's true.
Every single person is valued and loved by God, and he desires to have a relationship with them, and we have a role to play in introducing them to him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. So that's a challenge for you this week. Go talk to someone about Jesus.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that ends our episode for today. Thanks for listening.
Thank you so much. Hope to see you next week.